When people ask me, what's so special about First Baptist on Fifth? I answer quickly. It's not our building, though lovely, or our worship, though meaningful, not our gatherings, though life-giving, or even our missions and ministries in the world, though impactful. The very best part of First on Fifth? Our people, hands down. In our Confession of Identity, we said this of our community. Here, you'll see retirees and families with rambunctious little ones, teenagers discovering their identities, middle-agers juggling all the demands of this season, young people navigating adulthood for the first time, and seniors rich in wisdom and encouragement. You can read our fiery op-eds in the paper, pass us moving about on the city streets, see us building ramps for the underserved, catch us finding beauty in our gardens and on hiking trails, and experience us taking delight in the world. At the core of our community, we are folks who love each other well. And at the core of our life together, we share in meaningful conversation about what it means to live and love in this world. That's what you'll hear and who you'll hear from in our new podcast series called Life Together. Each episode will be hosted by one of our ministers and will feature a conversation with one or two or even several of our beloved church members. They'll answer a handful of questions about their story, about objects or artifacts that represent their journey, about questions or doubts they wrestle with, and why they are a member, and finally, what gives them hope. As you listen to their wisdom and laughter, their audacious hope and abundant love, I trust you'll be as inspired and moved as I am on the regular. T.S. Eliot once asked, "What life have you if you have not life together?" Join us this season for Life Together.
Hello and welcome to the First Baptist on Fifth Life Together podcast series. Thank you for listening. We are so glad to have Linda and Joseph Jones in conversation with us today. Linda and Joseph, we go back a ways,
Sure do.
As we will probably get to later in the conversation, we were part of a church plant years ago before we were actually members here together, and that was called Via Faith Community. We may get into talking a little bit about that, but first I wanted to introduce our guests. So Linda Jones, officially titled Reverend Dr. Linda Jones, an ordained Baptist minister, served in churches affiliated with the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, as well as denominational leadership, I know in North Carolina and other areas. Your ministry was related to missions and also helping churches to do ministry outside of the church walls. Joseph is a good friend, an artisan and maker of fine furniture, a deep thinker. His work, his fine furniture work and woodwork has been used for institutions like Wake Forest University, here at the church, First Baptist on Fifth, and other places. So look forward to talking with you guys today. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. We have a handful of questions today as we talk about life together. But first, let's start with story. So could you tell us your story, particularly the people or places or the season of your life that have most powerfully shaped you, for good or for ill, your understanding of God and yourself?
Shall I go
That's
first?
a big opener right there. Yeah.
Well, for me, it starts with my mom. My mom was a single mom with 5 kids. By the time I was 13, my parents had separated. And she was a strong woman who faced life challenges and moved forward. She had a strong faith. I didn't understand it as I grew older and became a Southern Baptist. I thought she had missed the boat and came to find out that she indeed was a woman of faith, and I was just judging her at the time. And then was a registered nurse in my early years, and we moved up to Connecticut to do a new church start. We were there 11 years, and it opened my eyes to new ways of being church, new ways that God related to us, new vistas to think about. And that was, in the middle of that, I felt a call to do something else, and I looked at getting my master's in nursing or becoming a counselor, and last on my list was going to seminary, but of course you know what God did. That was 3 years every weekend going to seminary up in Northborough, Massachusetts. It was Southern Baptist Seminary's Boston campus at the time. Long shutdown. But that really expanded my ideas about God and theology and ministry in the world. And when I graduated, I came down to Winter Park Baptist Church and served as associate pastor there. And I guess...
And that was in Wilmington, North Carolina?
Wilmington, North Carolina. And moving here to Winston to work at CBF North Carolina was, again, another new vista, because I ran into Tripp Fuller, who was looking to start a church, and we met every week. Laura Barkley, who worked in our office. I met you and other Wake Div students, and heavy discussions about theology and God and who we are and how that all works together. And it was, again, a new vista of learning and considering ways of being a Christian in the world. And here I am, many years later.
Very good. I love that you were, I guess, what would have been Southern Baptist, but all your experience was in the American North. So like New Jersey, Boston area, and then you finally make it to North Carolina and down south, I guess.
Yes.
And then now it's the cooperative Baptist world. So as Linda shared her story, Joseph, what about you? Like, how would you answer that?
Well, I had 3 different experiences that had life-changing experiences for me. The first one was when I was 17, 18 years old. I had this deep desire to understand and to know the truth. I grew up in church, so I had all these stories and supposedly right answers, correct answers about God, but it just wasn't very fulfilling for me at that time. And so I was about 18, and I was involved in a singles group, trying to really discover God that was a deeper God than what I had grown up believing. And I had a extraordinary experience where I audibly heard God speak to me. And that literally set me on a different trajectory than what I was heading before. The second one was when I was about 52 years old. We had moved to Winston-Salem. We were here for a while, trying to recreate another identity here as a woodworker was a lot difficult. To try to break in and reestablish myself as a studio furniture maker was difficult. And so I started having a lot of questions about God and how God was walking with me at that point, to the point where I just kind of gave up on God. And so I went back trying to find truth. So scientifically, you go back and you start reducing to find the beginning and then start building from there. So I went back into science. I started studying Einstein's theory and general theory and relativity, and which led me to quantum mechanics, and then it moved me on, in understanding more about that. The deeper that I got into the mathematics of science, kept pointing back to God, which really surprised me. And from there, it just started changing my whole concepts of what God meant to me and how he related to me and how I related to him and how the whole world works together. And then the third experience, I guess, was basically when during COVID, was having a hard time really trying to identify and adjust into church. It was changing a lot. We had never really got deeply connected into the church, and so we were struggling with that. We had talked about leaving the church, Linda and I together, and so we called Emily to say, we're thinking about this. So graciously as she was, she came to the house and sat down and talked, and convinced us to stay. She says, things will change. She says, I promise you. And man, did they change. And that was just a very satisfying experience, like a new revelation of God to us and how we relate.
That's a good word. I feel like so many times people just hang on just a little longer. It's going to get better, and then it doesn't. So it is good to have some like those in life where it's like, hey, I was patient, which is hard. I think all of us in ways struggle with like patience and being willing to be with something for a while, even when it's not easy or good. Yeah. And so that's a really good word to hear. One thing we've been asking folks that are interviewed on the Life Together podcast is to describe an object or an artifact that you can relate to your faith journey. And some people have brought actual items in-house, and then others have talked about items. But I think you both brought your own items. Is that right?
We did?
Yeah. This is a little show and tell time. So, Linda, would you like to lead us off with some show and tell?
Sure.
Yeah.
I brought a picture of my mom. Oh. And she was quite remarkable. She died of ovarian cancer and was full of faith and said, I know where I'm going, and, led everyone in the family to accept her death. But very, very special. I brought a frog, because I think I've really been on a journey of learning and my faith expanding and theology changing. And it's been a great journey of change. And I brought, this is a bowl from South Africa, and it's made with telephone wire, believe it or not, colored telephone wire. And I have artifacts all through my house of all the travels. I've realized that even after this last trip, I've been to 23 countries and seeing all the different cultures and not just a visual, let's just surfacely travel through, but being able to get in the culture has been so meaningful. And seeing how alike we all are as humanity and how God relates to each of us in our own little world. Yeah, it's been special.
So for me, I brought one of my books. It's a new book that I just found recently. He's an Italian scientist. Federico Fagan is his name. And he wrote a book, Irreducible. So the concept of you cannot reduce consciousness, and how that ties in with life and computers and the human nature. And so so being 70 years old or living 70 years, you realize that nothing ever stays the same. And so I have found that my theology has not stayed the same. And every time that I read something different, it broadens my concept and understanding of theology and how that relates to me and how I relate to the world.
And one thing from the book, if I may add, he says this book says AI can never achieve consciousness, and that we can be comfortable with that idea. So we will never have robots that are humanoids and have conscious and come to fight us.
I don't know. Like, it seems to me that like theology, there's some theology starting to talk about AI a little bit. And I never knew we were going to go this way with the conversation. But so theology is starting to talk about it because it says a lot about the human person. Because you're thinking, well, what I mean, I'm more probably in the camp that I feel almost threatened by AI. Like, oh, all these people are right. You got this program that can write your paper for you, and like I take pride in like that kind of stuff. Like that maker aspect. And so. But I think theology is starting to do that. I don't know how churches are if we're even there yet, but some of the kind of higher theology kind of world is talking today, but a little more. You have to face it because like all our world is using that on so many levels now. So that sounds fascinating. One thing that came up when you were both kind of sharing your stories, you didn't say it directly, but kind of this idea of calling. To me, Linda, did you have some kind of call to nursing early on, or where you felt drawn to that world, and then eventually that was kind of led to this call to ministry? What?
Well, no. I'm old enough that when I graduated from college, and I was heading for a teacher's degree, and believe it or not, there were no teacher jobs at the time. Believe it was very hard. And they were probably better paid in comparison than today. But now there's plenty of jobs. So, you basically could be secretary, nurse, teaching, it was very limited. And so I went into nursing. But I think I went into nursing because God was calling me to a deeper concept of Him. I had been raised through my mom in mainline denominations, and I was struggling to find a personal God. And so I thought I could find more meaning by becoming a nurse. And so that's what I did, and ended up with a Christian roommate. And I still think I was Christian at the time. I was just confused and searching for that deeper relationship. And I found it. I walked the aisle wasn't a Southern Baptist church. It was a Brethren church. But then I was going to a singles Bible study that was Southern Baptist. That's where Joseph and I met.
Okay. Yeah.
And the Bible study would rotate to different places and landed at my nursing dorm. So that's where I got connected with Southern Baptist. But I was always very passionate about being involved in church. I did ACT Teens. We taught Sunday school. And when our call we had friends that moved up to Connecticut, and I was visiting home in New Jersey and said, let's go visit our friends in Connecticut. And they said, come up and help us. And I said, I'm willing, as leaders, not as pastors in any way. And Joseph said, I'm going to live and die in Dayton. So you tell that story.
Yeah, we had, oh my goodness. First part of our marriage, I don't know, we moved it was a crazy 13 times. So from rental to a house to rentals and moving to different parts of the country. And we finally made our way back to Dayton, where we kind of got established for about 5 years. And then all of a sudden we get this guy who's saying, come help us. And it's like, thanks, no thanks. I'm done.
And this was where? Come help us. Where?
He was wanting us to come to Connecticut.
Okay.
For a new church start.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I
long way from Dayton. How far was that?
yeah, I don't know.
900 miles?
Yeah. Wow.
So tell the story.
I threw out all my anchors, tithing more, working with the youth, all this kind of stuff. I loved my job. I loved the people who I worked with. And I just felt so I was losing my desire to be there. And
in Dayton?
In Dayton. I couldn't figure it out. I thought I was a little too young for a midlife crisis at this point. And so I sat down and I said to Linda, what do you think? And she says, well, I don't know. She says, why don't you write David a letter and ask him what he was thinking? So I sat down with a pen and paper to write this letter to him. And the phone rings, and it's David on the other end of the phone. And at that point, it just washed away all of the fear and, this whole intimidation of moving again. And
if I may interrupt, I told God I was going to keep my mouth shut. I wasn't going to say a word. He knew I was willing to go. And the first month, Joseph said, I'm always so happy here, and I'm just so dissatisfied. And the second month, he said, I can't get this off my mind. And the third month, he said, we're supposed to go. And then God made a way. I mean, we literally, the kids were little, and we found a place to rent where there were no rentals, and he found a job where that was a great job, and everything just, I went in and did my nursing, RN at the hospital. And we worked with that New Church Start for 11 years. It was a home mission board, New Church Start.
Yep.
And then in the middle of that, I was planning worship. I was Sunday school education director. I was the person who worked with all the missions. And in the middle of that, I just felt a call to seminary.
Was your church at the time supportive of that call for you?
It was at first, but we had some couples, we thought it was, but we had some couples who had moved in that were very conservative, and they kind of laid low. And then they were put on we had elders and deacons, and they were put as elders eventually. And towards the end of my seminary, which was 3 years, they came out and said, no women. And it was right when all that was happening at Southern Seminary. And so at the end of that, there was no place for me to stay in New England. And I put my resume up and down the moderate. We didn't even have a reference and referral for CBF at that time.
This is like early days.
Yes, it was 90s.
90s, okay.
Early 90s. Yeah. And I guess I graduated in 95. And put it to the moderators down the coast, and I was picked up by Winter Park Baptist in Wilmington. Great 10 years there. Great 10 years.
Yeah.
So how was that, Joseph? Were you kind of like, okay, well, I've already moved once. What's another time at that point? Or
yeah, there were issues and things that were happening in the church after Linda had graduated. The pastor had left, moved on, and so Linda was willing to step in, made that known to the church, saying that I'll be more than glad to help in any way that I can. There was another male in the church who was wanting to be a pastor, and so she said, I'd be even gracious, to work with him, And the church was just too Southern in a sense of the word. Southern Baptist, to have a female on staff, as any kind of pastoral figure. And
so what made you move?
We couldn't find any medium ground to work with. And so, there was no other opportunity. There was no opportunity for her to be able to use what she had just received from God. And so when she put her resume out and was picked up by Wilmington, I was at that point ready to go as well.
And you're thinking, oh, it's near the beach, and
yeah.
So when you were down in Wilmington, did you find your own calling? I mean, you weren't on staff at a church, but because you had earlier said when you came to Winston, that was a tough.
Yeah,
did you kind of find a groove when you were in Wilmington there?
It took a while to find that groove. It was really difficult. So, working with a studio furniture maker where you're building, beautiful pieces of furniture and the design aspect and the construction of it, and then, seeing people, the joy that people had at what you had created, that was just life fulfilling for me. And moving to Wilmington, I had to start all over again. And by the time we moved to Wilmington, the whole investment of arts started to take its downtrodden journey. What was it, 60 or 96? 90?
No,
97?
96.
96. And then moving to the South, people had history of their antiques that were more interesting to them than, new pieces of art, that they could sleep on or sit at a table and eat at, or, play games on or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that was a real difficult move for me to find that.
He eventually made desks and pieces of furniture that were put in galleries and did quite well for a short time. And then the bottom dropped out in 2000. Was it? I don't know.
Yeah.
When recession hit.
Sure.
And then the
2008
galleries
or
went,
9
then the
or something,
galleries closed. So he had another downturn.
Yeah.
But we've always prayed together and came to a decision together about calling and moving. And even as the kids got older, brought them into a little bit of the decision, not the final answer.
Yeah. When you are sharing that, I was thinking like in scripture, there's just all these different characters that have these kind of call moments, and sometimes they hear that audible God says go or do this, and then other times they're like really reluctant. Like I think it's like Jonah, that story. Yeah. Jonah's like, nah, I'm going to go the opposite way, kind of, but it just calling is kind of it's personalized, and you kind of don't know. Like when you go to that next thing, you don't know what you're going to experience.
And you hope it's going to be great. And sometimes it's really difficult.
Yeah, for sure. So what was it like doing the church planting thing? I had experience with you guys. That's my only church plant experience. It's a lot of things I love about it. It's a unique way of doing ministry, right? What are some things that drew you to that specific type of ministry, like starting something brand new?
Our greatest experiences on this journey have been when you're on the journey with people, meaning that you're involved deeply in each other's lives, and they're almost like family. They become family. And I was looking for that type of church, and at the time thought that we could create that, in a real authentic way. Of relating to God and doing some new things, styles of worship. But more than that, I think it was the people we were doing it with. There was an excitement. And I think I wanted to replicate the church planting that we did in Connecticut, that in spite of it being difficult at the end with the argument over women in ministry and how you look at Scripture, I was looking to replicate that down here. Okay. And had met some Wake Div students that were interested in doing it also, and Beverly Hatcher, who was with us. And so it was this journey together of let's see if we can plant something. And I have to say it was very unique, and the emerging church category was going on then, and it was at the tail end of emerging church. We didn't know we were at the tail end of that.
This is about, let's say, 2008 to 2010, somewhere around this time. Okay. Yeah.
And we're all still very closely connected, the leaders of that effort. And even though we're all dispersed, we have this feeling in our hearts of we really know each other and we really love each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear like from different like church leadership things, like the biggest growth you're going to find is in church planting. But also, if you look at the ones that actually last more than 3 to 5 years, it's such a small percentage. It's a high risk, high reward kind of thing, almost like a startup.
Yeah, ours was really 1 year planning, 6 years functioning, and that last year was just everybody was dispersing.
Yeah.
And it was just, we had a lot of young people, and it was just their time in life to go get jobs, to move for jobs, to, everybody just kind of did their thing and moved away from Winston-Salem.
And so, I was there till, I came back on staff here, in 2012. And so I think VIA was still happening. And I was just looking in my office. I have my ordination certificate on the wall, and you're on there, and Beverly was on there. So both of you were on that. So there's kind of that. It's still part of me, and still something I still carry with me. Even though that I had moved on from that church. So that was a very casual in a lot of ways, though I don't think that's really the right word. It's very low key. Would you say what are some ways you would describe how we did worship? Because it looks very different than, I guess, how we do life.
It was come as you are. Now we tend to think that's closed. No, come as you are, like you can be your authentic self. I thought the way we did worship, I mean, we had the prayer candles, but we had it based around a theme. We did video clips. It all sounds superficial, but we had a 12-minute devotional sermon that we reflected on as part of worship. But I think my greatest fun times there was our fifth Sunday when we had communion, and it was around a potluck dinner. And it really was the deeper relationships that it brought about and the leadership that we shared, all of us, in crafting this and knowing each other well. There was that deep communal feeling of family. Mm-hmm. Good family. Not all family is necessarily good.
Well, what we also experienced was watching the Wake Div students that were a part of this, watching how they were growing and how they were learning, so which caused us to grow as well too. Mm-hmm. So it was, we were feeding each other, and our theologies expanded so much during that time that we had. So it was difficult to watch it wane away. Each individual who moved on, we were blessed to be a part of their life and to watch them, and we still connected with several of them.
Yeah, we ordained 5 Wake Div students during that time. Yeah.
So I think like every church that you're at, whether it was a good experience or not a good experience, there's something about it that you really connect with. And so you mentioned you like the potluck communion. I love just how we basically did communion every Sunday, and it was like you have a big loaf of bread, and then you serve somebody, and then you hand them the bread, and then they serve somebody. And so like everybody's doing the serving, and it was a complete mess, but it was beautiful. Mm-hmm. But that's just what I kind of remember about that community. Yes. And I don't know that that's practical in all situations, but I just love that. That's kind of my memory of that place.
Yes.
So First on Fifth is a very different expression. There's a lot of similarities, I think, in kind of maybe the types of people that may be here now. How did you reconnect here as kind of Via's fading out, and then you two are becoming part of this congregation again?
Well, even when I was at Via, Brent Green always made a point to stay connected with me. Mm-hmm. And I was still an official member. We both were. But and even when we joined years earlier, it was David who reached out to us and connected with us. So, I mean, the way that First on Fifth reaches out means something, the relationships and the way you form friendships. Not as, please come to church, but a genuine relationship. So when Via was fading out, we came back. And, when we first moved to town, we looked at other churches, but always there was something about the authenticity of friendships here. And when we came back, that was still here. I was ready to step into leadership and didn't find my place in the sun for a while. But and we were getting used to the liturgical worship, but the more you experience liturgical worship and the readings, the more you get out of it, the deeper you realize how this functions in your life and how meaningful it can be. When we were at Winter Park in Wilmington for 10 years, we had the traditional Baptist worship service at 11, and we had the open door at 8:30, which was not like Via, but like a contemporary worship service but we were the first ones in town in 1996 with the praise band and everything. And so we've experienced a lot of different worship services, but coming back to liturgical, we had to get used to it again and found deep meaning in it, but it was really the people of First Baptist. What would you say, Joseph?
Yeah, to after Via and coming here, it was people like John,
The mission.
Carlos, in our Bible study class that we were in. So John, Carlos, Sally, Scott, all the others, our conversations that we would have of reading a book, just, that was like a real breath of fresh air. I felt very accepted, in being in this group. So these were all educators, people who would teach other people. And so for me to fit into that group was, a real fun experience for me, real uplifting, and how I had time and things that I could share with them as well too. So.
So do you have any stories that you would say I experienced this one story here at First on Fifth, and I think that would explain the church to me, or to someone else? Like, oh, well, this is how I would describe the church.
I love that this church says all are welcome, and they don't mean surface welcome. They mean all are included, fully included. And so I love looking out at a congregation of diversity where I individually know many, many people and get to be on the journey with them. And no matter how diverse they are or what their gender is or what their calling is, that we can be on this journey together. So even just Saturday night, we were at the Young People's Bonfire, and it's all ages. And you can have these wonderful conversations and feel very connected. I would say that, connected. And the Sunday school class I'm in, I love coming on Sundays. It's mostly 50s and 60s, some 40s, and we're the old timers in it. But the intergenerational conversation and the acceptance of all of us as just people. We're not labeled as, oh, they're the old timers, even though we know we're getting old. We're a little shocked by it, being this age.
Hear, hear. So for me, the Pride Parade, well, we've participated in this two times so far. The first time, we were out at a booth there on, what was that?
Trade Street.
On Trade Street. And so we were handing out, information about our church and just greeting colorful people up and down the street. And this one girl came up to me, and I handed her a thing there. She started to walk away. She looked at the paper, and then she came back, and she said, "Thank you." She says, "I've been wanting to find a place that I could connect with." She says, "May I give you a hug?" Wow. Stole my heart. This last Pride Parade that we were a part of, we actually did the walk. We were in the parade. And here I am, this cowboy-looking guy with a cigar and walking in the back. And I'm watching the street people, cheer us on.
The spectators.
Yeah. It was so moving in the point that here I am recognizing that I'm a white cowboy-looking guy mixed in with a sea of different kinds of people, different colors, different languages, different ways of loving humanity. And I felt so whole, so at one. So that touched me and moves me. And that's what I feel hope is.
Yeah, that's really good. When I hear us talk about bold love and boundless compassion, like that's it can't just sound like words, But then when you experience that, like, no, this is what it is. some of these conversations we've been having, I think it comes up with a lot of different people. It's like, you can come as you are. And we can say that like on a sign that all are welcome, but it doesn't mean that everywhere. Right. And just to hear that, that's the kind of stories we need. And you didn't do a lot. I'm not downplaying that. You were just showed up. You were there.
Yeah.
But being there, something happened beyond you.
Yeah.
And I think that's how the Spirit moves in that. It's not necessary. We just kind of show up, but if we didn't show up, what would happen then? I mean, what stories would we be telling? So that's amazing to hear that from you. That you come here Sunday, you come as you are, and then whoever else is here, and then that. What kind of expectations can you throw on that? Like, how are you going to really plan this thing out? Because it depends on who's there. Yeah. What does Emily say when people join? It's like something like, we
come and help us lead.
Yeah, lead. They're like, great.
To be more kind,
Sure.
loving, giving.
Yeah.
Forgiving.
And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're a 5-year-old that's up there, or an 80-year-old, or some young adult that's never been Baptist in their life and is scared to call themselves Baptist to people that don't know what that is. Yeah. So, that's pretty amazing. That's quite a responsibility. But, so I think that kind of leads to this hope question, and I think you've already bring up. So what's giving you hope right now? I mean, a lot of people would say there's not a lot of hope going on in our world. So what's some hope that you find in our world, or here at First on Fifth?
Well, in this political season, I find hope at First on Fifth, that there are people who love Jesus, who really follow Jesus every day, and make an effort to love each other and to love the world. And so that gives me hope. And we need to reach out more with other churches like us or other entities like us. We need a movement, a bigger movement. And I think I see pieces of that happening this political season. I think we tend to stay quiet and humble and do our thing, but I think we need to speak up. And we are speaking up. Of saying there's a different way of being a Christian this political season.
Hope. Hope is to find. I'm going to say it. This divine conscious entity that has so much love, that has shown us at times what love is and how to love. But the hope is to experience that love. What I experienced in the Pride Parade on those 2 occasions, that's the hope that I want for everybody. And this is a church that I've been able to express that and find that and to experience that. And my hope is that we can get to a deeper form of love that draws more people into that. Despite, the political climate that goes on and all the negative aspects of humanity that we experience, that this love of this divine consciousness has brought to us, that we can get beyond ourselves and all of our selfish desires and to experience that hope of love.
In experiencing that hope as we grow into that, like, what is something that, or a way that you work on your spiritual growth? Like, what are some practices that you may have? Because you've had many seasons of church ministry. It's looked different in different ways. How do you know that you keep growing, like closer to God, closer to neighbor? What are some practices that help sustain that for you?
Well, you do meditation.
Yeah, the meditation it drowns out the selfish ambitions and drives that I have, and allows me to quiet my mind down, and then the experiences of this conscious love that puts me in a different place. And I don't know what else to say about that, but it's a different place. It's a different place within me. It's not, when I think of Joseph, it's not this body, it's not what I've done or created or am a part of. It's something that is deeper within. And it's that connection with this God that drives it.
That's good.
Well, I'm the extrovert. I have a hard time staying still. So I like nature. I like to walk and think and pray. I'm a prayer in the middle of the night when I can't sleep. And I'm a reader of books. I was asking Joseph, what got me out of Southern Baptist theology and onto new ways of thinking? And he reminded me that I started when I was on staff at Winter Park. I was reading Blue Like Jazz and Brian McLaren, very early books and then I
Generous orthodoxy.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have them all on my bookshelf, and can't bear to really give them away, and set up small groups to discuss it. And so I'm in a retired ministers group of discussion on Zoom every month, and so I find just getting into discussions and being willing to be open and willing to. Some people have a hard time when I'm challenging them with their thinking, but this repartee back and forth helps me to grow and understand. And we were talking on the way in too, how when you're into new thinking, you have to deconstruct old thinking, and sometimes that is really difficult, and you really need conversations about, well, what if I take this out of my way of thinking about God and man, then, well, what about the cross, or what about this, and you have to sort of really search deep to put it all back together, and that's through other people and through reading and through prayer.
Thank you for sharing that, Linda. We want to thank Linda and Joseph Jones for sharing in conversation with us today. And we want to thank you, listeners, for tuning in to the Life Together podcast. To listen to previous episodes, you can find them on our website, firstonfifth.org, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next week.